So when we're working with the font, one of the most common things that we'll want to do is change the size of that font, how big it appears on the screen. And if we're using Microsoft Word or we're using PowerPoint or a Google Doc, we just have a drop-down list in which we can change the size. And that size always appears as a point value. You know, you've heard of points. So in this little tutorial, we're going to talk about the different values we can have with a font size. A good resource whenever you have a question, whenever you want to look something up, is W3C Schools, and this website is linked on our website under the links, and it has tutorials on HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and even Python. But here, let's look at font sizes for just a little bit. So this is the CSS property to change the font size, font-size. And this is an example of a value. This is a value in pixels, px. You can also have a value in em. You could also have a value of percent. There's actually lots of different values. You can have things like these, centimeters, millimeters, inches, points, pixels, pica. Those are set. Those are fixed widths that may not change based on the screen size. But you think we have so many different types of devices, from jumbotrons and big screen TVs. You can get huge monitors for your desk, or you can get small laptop monitors, or you could use something like an iPad or your cell phone. We want our font size to change in relation to what device that we use. And that's where these relative units come into play. Relative units, the most common we'll see is a percentage or em, and these are preferred by the W3C schools. This is what it recommends us to use because they will change in relation to the size of the screen. Now, in this chapter, we do use points a lot. We do use pixels a lot, and that's because those are things that we're familiar with as we first get started coding. But if you ever see a website that has a unit of em or rem, or even these viewport units like VH and VW, know that those are just different units of measurement of a value. If you get confused when you're using ems, there's also a conversion tool where you could take how many ever ems it is and convert it to pixels. So I have 1.2 ems here, and the result is that's 19.2 pixels. But say I wanted, let's say I had a 12 pixels that I wanted to see what that was in em, so that's 0.75 em. So that's a tool for us to use as we're getting started learning about different value units for the font size. Okay. Also, on page 94 through 97 in your textbook, there's all sorts of different new properties that are introduced. And some of these we are going to use in this walkthrough, but there is no way possible that I could teach you every potential CSS property that exists. As we go through this, you're going to start to realize that when there's something that you want to do, you can use W3C Schools to look it up and find out what it's actually called so that you can use that in your website, okay? But let's learn some new ones. So open HP 3-2. This is that Trillium Media Design website that you created in that 3-2 whatever tutorial that I did. And we're going to add some more styles to this. If you want to follow along in the book, these start on page 98. Okay, so for the body in this, and currently let me show you what this website looks like in case you don't remember. I don't even have it loaded there. It looks like this currently. And each time we add some more CSS rules, let's try to view it in our browser and make sure you view it in the browser so you can see what these changes look like. So for the body, inside our curly brackets, we are going to change the font family to Arial. Ooh, I misspelled Arial, Verdana, and sans serif. Now remember, The reason we have 3 there is in case Arial's not installed on the computer, it looks for Verdana. If that's not installed, then it just looks for a sans serif font. Okay, let's do Alt-B and look at it in the browser, and now you can see that we have this sans serif font. There's no more of those little hooks on our font. Okay, on page 99, for the H1, we're going to do something called line height. So let's change the line height and see what happens. We're going to do line height 200%. Okay, and let's look at our website, and I'm going to refresh it and watch what happens. You should be looking at H1, so we know this is an H1 and this is an H1, and as I refresh, oh no, this was our H1. Y'all, it's been a long day. See how that got wider? We have more background color here and here because the line space is actually taller. Okay, let's change our font family there, and we should remember what that does. So I'm not going to load in a browser, but you might want to just double check and make sure you have it typed correctly. We're going to do Georgia, Times New Roman, and serif. If you're using Visual Studio Code and you get this drop down, just tab over, and that will add that to it. And it's okay that it says Times and ours doesn't. That's fine. And next, let's look at text indent. Text indent moves our text over and indents it, and we're going to say indent it 1em. Okay, so we're looking at the H1 here. Watch what happens when I refresh. Okay, it changed it to a serif font, and then it moved it over slightly. Okay, for the H2, we're also going to change that font family. Sorry. And it's going to be Georgia Times New Roman. So I'm just going to tab that over to select that auto text so that appears there. And then let's do a text align center. What do you think that's going to do? Well, if you said it's going to center align our text, you would be correct. So let's take a look in our browser. And now these H2s here and here are center aligned. Okay, so the text align center centers our text. Now let's change something about the nav section. We want to change the way that the nav section appears. So still inside of our style tag, before our style tag closes, we'll add the nav as the selector, open our set of curly brackets, and we'll begin typing our declaration statements. We're going to change the font weight to bold. So remember how we used the B tag in the last chapter down here? But remember, we also said that's kind of more of a format, and we like to do our formatting in our CSS. So from now on, whenever we want to make something bold, we won't use the B tag, we'll use font weight bold. So that's going to make everything in this nav section, the word home, services, and contact, bold. We're going to change our font size to 1.2em. And we're going to do a word spacing of 1em. Word spacing puts extra space between our words. So let's look at that. So we are in the nav section, so in between these words, there should be extra space. So let's watch what happens. And it did. So the word spacing is kind of like that non-breaking space character, that ampersand MBSP that we learned about last chapter. But it allowed us to do it in our CSS, which is preferred. Okay? Let's do some work with our paragraphs. So below that curly bracket, I'm right above my closing style tag. We'll add a paragraph selector. We're going to change our font size. Our font size to 0.9 0em. You don't have to include that 0. And we're going to text indent 3em. Okay. So let's see what that looks like. And we're on the paragraph, so this is a paragraph and this is a paragraph. Okay. So see, it made the text a little smaller and it indented it over. Okay. For our unordered list, we want our font to be bold. So if we want to select all of this unordered list, all this text here, and make it bold, we can do unordered list for our selector and font weight bold. Now, if you see and let me explain this, I may not have done this in a previous video. When I type things like font and then I hit my dash and it appears here, I could click on it, but that means I have to take my hand off my mouse. If I press tab on the keyboard, that will insert it. Okay? And then bold. And I'm pressing tab to insert. Okay? But that's only if you're using Visual Studio Code. If you're using something else, you'll have to type it out. Okay, so let's see how we're looking now. Alt B on the keyboard, and now those are in bold. Okay, so we're going to leave this project up, so keep it open for the next tutorial, but I'm going to stop this video because it's getting rather long. Okay, come back for learning about classes and IDs.